Hi, this is Jay Horwitz with a special edition of the Amazing Mets Alumni podcast. And my special guest this week is Kim Harrelson, former wife of Mets player, coach, manager, jack of all trades, Buddy Harrelson. Kim, I'm a hopeless romantic, that's me. And I think the stuff what you're doing with Buddy would make a great movie. Let me give a little background. You were married for 34 years, got divorced in 2010, but still, when Buddy was stricken with Alzheimer's, late teen 2015, you have stuck by his side. You become his advocate, which he now is in an assisted living place in Long Island. You're on the board of directors of the Alzheimer's Association, telling people about Buddy and what Alzheimer's, how it affects family. I mean, how do you do what you do, basically?
Well, it's all out of love, really. Jay, Bud, as you know, is the kindest, most generous man, I have ever known. I think you feel that same way about him.
Me too. Sure.
We were always amicable and we were friends after the divorce. He said, I just want you to be happy. That's Bud. He wants everyone to be happy. And he's the quintessential caregiver, always reaching out, always caring for others, always, especially the underdog, underprivileged, disabled. That's who he's been his whole life. And so when he was diagnosed, even before that, when he showed signs, my daughter got involved and got him an appointment to get him tested before 2016. And the test came back negative for Alzheimer's and dementia. I guess there wasn't enough there to really give a precise diagnosis. And when the symptoms kept presenting themselves 2 years later, I brought him to his primary care doctor in 2016, and he flat out said, Kim, he has Alzheimer's, just, symptomatically knowing Bud over many years. And at that moment, Bud, of course, was very upset. And I told him that he would never be alone going through this. And we didn't know where to begin. We were lost. There is no cure for Alzheimer's. There's maintenance and caregiving and clinical trials. And so we were put in touch with an organization and eventually found our way to the Alzheimer's Association of Long Island because they were so accessible to us. And everyone there has experienced Alzheimer's in their own personal lives. And so the people who staff the office and run the caregiving groups and educate people are all empathetic. So anyway, what happened, the way I got really involved is because during COVID, we had to let go of the caregivers. And my son and daughter were living home at the time. And, especially my son was overwhelmed with caregiving. And, anyone who's a parent out there knows that you'll do anything for your children. And so I moved into the home. I rented my home and moved back in with Bud and TJ. And it was only then that I saw the level of care that was needed. And I wanted my children to be free to live their lives and visit their dad. And I was at that time and place available to do this. And it was very comfortable. It was the home I had lived in. I knew how to care for the home, and it was easy caring for Bud in the beginning. And as it became more difficult, that's when we got extra help. And I reached out to the Alzheimer's Association more and their helpline, and eventually found our way to full-time private caregiving in the home. And then that became very challenging. He went from being able to do many things for himself to needing help with everything. And he was unable to now move around. He loved walking about around the block, and that became challenging. He couldn't go in the backyard because it was dangerous. There were steps and there's a pool. He lived in 3 rooms of his home. So he was a prisoner at his home, and he was paying for the home and property and maintenance, and only able to live in 3 rooms. And so it was suggested that we look for an assisted living facility. And there was one just opening, very local, so convenient for us to visit, beautiful, only dealing in dementia and Alzheimer's. And he moved in there in June of 21. He's been there ever since. And you have visited him there.
Yes, ma'am. You have become, let me just backtrack a little bit. The family made the decision 16 or 17 to go public. That's what he had, what he had. I remember you made special preparations in one of the baseball writers dinner when the 69 guys were there. I remember we sat in with all who would have company there. I mean, but you really become his advocate now, speaking to different groups, athletes, talking about the disease with just his family, because unfortunately, Buddy can't do that anymore. But what made you go public with the decision, when you did, to let people know what he had?
It was immediate. Within 2 weeks of his diagnosis, he said, I want to go public with this. And I want people to know that they're not alone. And we had been well practiced in fundraising. In 1982, the Suffolk County chapter of the Make-A-Wish Foundation of America was opening, and Bud was involved in the very first wish, and we were deep into fundraising and advocating for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So for like the next 15 years, Bud was always very, very happy to lend his name and his fame and his goodwill to a worthy cause.
He worked for the community relations department, did he, Kim? Yeah, I remember he worked for the community relations department with the Mets too.
Yes.
For a time. In addition to being a manager, coach, and player, he did the other stuff too.
Yes. After he was fired from being the manager, he segued into community relations until he got involved with bringing the Long Island Ducks to Long Island.
Talk about the Ducks for a second. I mean, it goes in line with Buddy that he managed for a while. He threw batting practice he could. He wanted to be involved with the community, right? That's why he was affiliated with the Ducks.
Yes, Jay. And that's his proudest moment. I mean, he's got a Golden Glove, and he played in the All-Star game, and he was present for 2 World Series on a major league team. He is proudest of bringing baseball to Long Island and the access that it has for the fans. It's a reasonable price. There's no charge for parking. It's safe. The people walk around. He was always available to sign autographs, whether they came down to the dugout or he'd be on the concourse, or he'd visit the skyboxes when he wasn't active during the game. And it was something that he loved doing, intermingling with the fans and being a part of baseball and the community.
Kim, when you go out and speak now, I mean, do people, do they ask you, what's the most common question you'll get now for a family who's just been struck with Alzheimer's with a family member? What do they ask you?
I haven't been asked too many questions in a speaking format, but our daughter Cassie spoke in 2018 at the Alzheimer's Caregiver Conference. And one of the questions was, what do I do? I'm the major caregiver and no one is available to help. And it was upsetting to this family member that other family members weren't pitching in equally. And something that we agreed upon very early, there's 5 children and myself involved in Bud's care. Team Harrelson, yes. And we agreed very early on to assume that everyone was doing their best and not to judge others' efforts. And that when we needed extra care, we would reach out to the paid care. This was when Bud was living at home. And the burden of care would, fall on more on one person than another, especially at the time my son, who was living at home and wasn't going out much, and TJ's home, so he'll be there for dad, not realizing the level of care needed. And until I moved in, I didn't realize it either. And I always assumed that everyone was doing their best. And when we needed extra care, we would reach out and get it, and not gossip or be judgmental or resentful of the family member who couldn't show up as much as another. And that was because I've seen families get torn apart by this disease, and it is extraordinarily burdensome to care for someone, and sometimes family members have to leave their job, and this becomes a full-time care, and no one's really ready for this. So we had to really gather ourselves. We created a team. Every time someone now goes to visit Bud, we take a picture and send it out and talk about the experience. My stepdaughter's in California, so she gets here once or twice a year, and this keeps her in the loop. And the other 4 children are working or going to school and very, very busy.
I think it was the summer. You arranged visits for myself and Art. We went to see Buddy, and you've been FaceTime with him. Is it hard, Kim? I mean, it wasn't really much recognition from me. I mean, he didn't really know who I was. And is it hard for you going there with your visits? Is there a time, do you think he knows who we are, or what's your thought about that? I mean,
I can only guess about what he actually knows, but he does recognize me when I go as someone he knows. He's always happy to see me. He may reach out and try to touch me. I don't really know if he knows who I am, his ex-wife, Kim, or who the kids are specifically when they visit him, but he also responds in a way that you think he knows who you are. And we enter the building and we enter Bud's reality, whether he's eating. If he's not eating, he's walking around. And that's his favorite thing to do. And he walks slowly, and he'll look up and he'll look at the other residents or the caregivers there. There's not much interaction, but he's being very well cared for. And he has private care within the facility now because he's a fall risk. While that is financially a burden, it makes me feel very safe all the time because I know that there's someone dedicated 24 hours a day to his care.
You sent me a picture. I've seen a picture of him holding a ball in his hand. Was that your picture or?
I took that picture. I went with a friend of mine who is very observant, and he noticed. We gave Bud a ball to hold because he'd walk with his hands behind his back, and as a fall risk, then you're like a lawn dart going head first. So we were hoping that a ball would help keep his hands in front of his body and maybe break a fall, or he could touch the wall. And this friend of mine noticed that between his right hand and his left hand, he was holding the ball differently. In his right hand, he was holding it in these 3 fingers, which, you use more.
Throw, right.
Throwing, and his left hand, it was just cupped in his palm. And that's something I wouldn't have noticed.
It's just great. Kim, you came to the Old Timers Day game. You saw some of the guys like Cleon and Sham and, and Craig. What was it like reminiscing with those guys? I know you weren't married, but you knew them through the years.
Oh, it was amazing. It was so unexpected. Bud's 2 older children were born during his earlier playing days, but our 3 children never saw him play. And so to bring my oldest daughter, Alexandra, there was a thrill for me, for her to meet some people that we knew long ago that she never got the opportunity to meet. And because we were representing Bud, we were allowed to be on the field and in the dugout. And the first person I saw was Felix Mion. And I could have cried because he's such a kind, generous man. Yes. He didn't look any different. Oh. And I was so excited to see him as, a fellow player of Bud. And then John Matlack.
Yeah.
And then I started seeing the players who Bud coached, and the players from '86 and, the years before that and after that he managed. But those two guys, the guys that he played with, that was an unexpected thrill for me. And to walk out on the field with Cleon, I said, Cleon, this is such an honor. And he said, the honor is mine.
He's a great guy. Nobody better.
He's a great guy. It was really feeling.
The iconic photo of Buddy running down third base with Ray Knight in the game. What did you bring back good memories for that for you?
Oh, yes. And it was so great to see Ray there. And we shared some personal stories, some tough times that we've both gone through. And it was a very touching moment.
Kim, going forward, what do you plan to do with the association? I knew you took part in the walk, right? What other things are you going to try to do to help them fundraise? This
past June was the first time I got involved with the longest day, only because I was a little confused about it before. And that's June 21st. So, summer solstice, the longest day of the year, which we can appreciate now. The sun's going down, by 4:30, it's dark. So that's their second largest fundraiser with the Alzheimer's Association. And you can get creative. So what I did was I offered a yoga class on Zoom for people to come and make a donation to our Team Harrelson for the longest day. And so that's the way I'm going to get more involved this year. I'm on the advocacy committee, and there's a spot open because Lee Zeldin left. And so we are advocating with the new congressman, and hopefully we'll get a meet and greet soon on Zoom. And my job is to tell my story. I'm not involved in the political end of pushing our agenda and, presenting our agenda as an organization and asking them for money. But when I tell Bud's story, and that's a privilege. Like I'm Kim Battaglia. I took my maiden name back, but having this connection to Bud all these years, using the name Harrelson, the goodwill that Bud developed because of the amazing, kind, gentle man he is, goes a very long way. That's what we use. He built that over decades of playing and showing up for the community. And that still has momentum, and that still has power. And as long as that's the truth, we're going to use it.
What's your long range goal? I mean, are they close to finding a cure? Not close to finding a cure? I mean, what have you heard about this?
Well, the Alzheimer's Association is the largest nonprofit fundraiser. They raise the most money. They donate the most money for research as a private group. And there are drugs on the horizon that have a lot of hope, that have been FDA approved. And I believe right now they're not in clinical trial, but they're available for people, certain groups of people. So we're pushing for the whole population to have access to these drugs. And there isn't a cure. I'm not sure what that looks like, if it will be one drug in the future or a combination of drugs along with lifestyle changes. So the Alzheimer's Association, to use a baseball metaphor, covers all those bases. They offer all of those options and education opportunities with cognitive and mild cognitive impairment, from mild cognitive impairment to actually being diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia. And they're working to research all of it so that one day there is a cure.
I got to ask you one more baseball question before we go. What did Buddy tell you about did you ever talk about the Pete Rose incident? Probably that's the one thing, maybe not the one thing, one of the top things that endured him to Met fan. He challenged the great Pete Rose in a fight during the playoffs in 1973.
Yes.
That tells the moxie of Buddy Harrelson, right? I mean, wasn't a big guy, but he got up fighting.
He did, which, after I knew him for a while was surprising. And we weren't together during that time. I think that was my last year in high school. And he told me what he would say to everybody. Yeah, I hit him in the fist with my face. He said, Pete said to him, thanks for making me popular. They did They did card signings together. They ended up playing together on the Phillies. He didn't go into too much detail. Actually, you sent me an article and I learned even more about it, that Bud had said something the day before at the Mets Cincinnati game about the players looking like Bud because they weren't hitting well. And I didn't realize that was the spark that angered the players, and Pete, then came in slid in hard at second base to kind of, teach Bud a lesson.
Yeah, Kim, I've been with the Mets a long time. I can remember one bad word ever said about Buddy. And when the player coach, the only really player to have, he's got 2 rings in '69 and in '86. And what's the one thing you want people to remember? I mean, what are your visits? What's the one thing you will remember about Buddy for you?
He is one of the most humble men I know. There was an article written Sunday that came out Sunday in the Daily News that talked about this, that we were getting letters after his diagnosis talking about how he impacted their lives. And these are stories that he never came home and told us. It's in his DNA. He's the quintessential caregiver. He sees a need and he's there to help. And the fact that he had a name and, a little bit of influence behind that name was a gift. And his motivation was always selfless. He would play in a golf tournament and always be on the par 3, beat the pro. He could be out there enjoying, all 18 holes, but he said, put me where I am the most useful. And
that was him. Exactly.
That was him. So just being civic minded, and you don't have to be a celebrity.
No.
To join a club, to join an organization. Just do something from your heart. That's where he always was motivated from the heart and could make an impact.
Kim, if a fan or Mets fan want to contribute, how would you contribute to this? Is there a zip, box office or anything?
There is. Well, if you wanted to contribute online, it's alz.org/Long Island. And then if you wanted to contribute specifically to Bud, you would find the walk, and they would ask you to search for a team. It's Team Harrelson. You could donate directly to Team Harrelson, or you could call, and I could give you the number, 800-272-3900, and any one of the staff would help get involved or make a donation.
So one of my favorite movies is Love Story. And I'm going to start to make to me, it's a great movie. Maybe Ali McGraw could play you.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
I love
but
her.
what you do, I think you're just tremendous, Kim, really. Just keeping his legacy alive, his name alive. I think it's a great thing, and we got to FaceTime again soon.
Yes, it's a privilege day. Thank you so much. And you know how much Bud loves you, right?
Yes, I love him too.
I know you do.
All right, thanks, Kim. I appreciate it. All right.
You're very welcome,
Bye.
Jay.